My name is Alina. I'm 32 years old, and the sound of my sister screaming in the labor and delivery room wasn't a scream of pain. It was a confession that shattered my entire world as she looked me dead in the eye and yelled, "He isn't yours, Alina. He isn't yours." The heart monitor was beeping erratically, matching the terrified rhythm of my own chest. My husband, Mark, was standing by her head, holding a cool washcloth, and he froze. The nurse looked between us, her hands still busy adjusting the monitors on my sister's stomach. I tried to laugh, a nervous, jagged sound that scraped my throat. I said, "Sarah, honey, it's just the pain talking, just breathe through the contraction." She grabbed my wrist, her fingernails digging into my skin so hard I knew it would leave marks. She pulled me down until my ear was inches from her lips, her face slick with sweat and twisted in a mix of agony and defiance. She whispered, "I didn't use Mark's sample, Alina. I threw it away." The room spun. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to say that this story touches on deep betrayal, infertility, and the trauma of a family falling apart. If you have ever felt like the ground was ripped out from under you by the person you trusted most, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share these stories. To understand why I was standing in that hospital room, paralyzed by my little sister's confession, you have to understand the 5 years of hell Mark and I had walked through to get there. We wanted a baby more than anything. We had the nursery painted a soft sage green before we even started trying. I had names picked out since I was 12, but my body didn't cooperate. Month after month, I would stare at negative tests until my eyes blurred, trying to force a second pink line to appear through sheer willpower. It never did. After a year, we went to the specialists. The diagnosis was a heavy medical term that basically meant my egg reserve was almost non-existent. I was 28, and I was running out of time. We tried 3 rounds of IVF with my own eggs. Each one was a roller coaster of hope that ended in a devastating crash. The hormones made me feel like a stranger in my own skin. The debt started piling up, tens of thousands of dollars on credit cards, a second mortgage on the house. And the grief. The grief was a quiet, suffocating thing that lived in our house like a roommate we couldn't evict. Mark was amazing, but I could see the light going out of his eyes too. He held me when I cried on the bathroom floor, but I knew he was hurting just as much. Then, at Thanksgiving dinner last year, my younger sister, Sarah, did something unexpected. Sarah was 25, wild, and beautiful in a chaotic way. She was the one who borrowed money and forgot to pay it back. She was the one who dated guys with motorcycles and bad credit scores. We loved her, but we didn't rely on her. But that night, over turkey and stuffing, she put her hand on mine. She looked at my swollen eyes. I had been crying in the bathroom again, and she said, "Alina, let me do this for you." I asked her what she meant. She said, "I have good eggs, I'm young, and honestly, I'm broke. I see how much you want this. Let me donate my eggs and I can carry it, I can be the surrogate." The room went silent. My mother dropped her fork. I looked at Mark. It was a crazy offer. Traditional surrogacy, where the surrogate uses her own egg and carries the baby, is legally risky and emotionally messy. Usually, you use a gestational carrier with an embryo that isn't related to her. But we didn't have any embryos left. And we didn't have the money for an agency, which costs upwards of $100,000. Sarah said, "I'll do it for the cost of medical bills and maybe you guys could help me with my rent for the year, just so I can focus on being healthy." It felt like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. We talked to lawyers. We talked to therapists. They all warned us about the risks. Mixing family and business is dangerous, the counselor said. If she bonds with the baby, it could be a nightmare, the lawyer warned. But I looked at Sarah, and I saw my little sister who used to let me braid her hair. I saw a chance to have a baby that was half my husband and half my bloodline. I desperately wanted to believe her. So we said yes. We drew up a contract. We paid off her credit card debt as a thank you before we even started. We paid her rent for 6 months in advance. We started the insemination process at a clinic, using Mark's sample. It worked on the first try. When Sarah showed me the positive test, we both screamed and jumped up and down in her living room. I felt a weight lift off my chest that I hadn't realized I was carrying for half a decade. We were going to be parents. But looking back, the red flags were there from the beginning. The first trimester was okay, but Sarah started getting demanding. She would call me at 2 a.m. saying she needed specific cravings, expensive sushi, organic juices, and if I didn't bring them, she'd say the stress was bad for the baby. I drove across town in my pajamas, terrified of upsetting her. Then there was the issue of the appointments. For the first ultrasound, she insisted on going alone. "I'm just feeling really sensitive," she told me over the phone. "I don't want a crowd in there looking at my junk." I was hurt. "I'm not a crowd, Sarah. I'm the mother," I said gently. She snapped. "Not yet, you're not. Right now, it's my body." I backed off. I was so scared she would change her mind that I let her dictate everything. Mark was less patient. "She's treating us like ATMs, Alina," he whispered one night after we transferred another $1,000 to her account for maternity clothes. "She needs to be comfortable," I defended her. "She's giving us a child." But then the boyfriend showed up. Sarah had been single when we started this, or so she said. Around the 4th month, a guy named Jax started hanging around her apartment. Jax was everything we feared. He had no job, a charm that felt oily, and he looked at me like I was a walking checkbook. "Who is this guy?" Mark asked her during a Sunday dinner. "He's just a friend," Sarah said, picking at her food. "He's supporting me emotionally." "I thought we were supporting you emotionally," I said, trying to keep my voice light. She glared at me. "You guys are just anxious. Jax gets me." I tried to be nice to Jax. I really did. But every time I went to Sarah's apartment, he was there. He was playing video games on the TV we bought her. He was eating the groceries we delivered. And sometimes, I'd catch them whispering in the kitchen, stopping abruptly when I walked in. I remember one specific afternoon. I came over early to drop off prenatal vitamins. The door was unlocked. So I walked in. Sarah and Jax were on the couch. His hand was on her stomach, on our baby. He was talking low and fast. I heard him say, "When that check clears, we are out of here, babe." I froze in the hallway. My heart hammered against my ribs. I stepped back and knocked loudly on the open door frame, pretending I had just arrived. They jumped apart. "Hey," Sarah said, her face flushing pink. "You didn't text." "Sorry," I said, my voice trembling. "I just brought the vitamins." I left, and I sat in my car and cried. I told Mark what I heard. "Maybe he meant when the surrogacy compensation is done," Mark suggested, trying to be the rational one. "Maybe they want to move to a nicer place." "We aren't paying her a lump sum at the end," I reminded him. "We're paying her expenses as we go. There is no big check." That was the night the seed of doubt really took root. But we were 7 months in. We were trapped. If we confronted her and she got angry, what would happen to the baby? So we kept quiet. We kept paying. We bought a crib. We bought a stroller. We had a baby shower where Sarah wore a tight dress and soaked up all the attention. Everyone told her she was a saint. She smiled and cradled her belly, looking like the picture of maternal sacrifice. Jax was there too, eating cake in the corner, watching Mark and me with a smirk that made my skin crawl. Then came the delivery day. Sarah went into labor 2 weeks early. She called me at 4 a.m. "It's hurting," she screamed into the phone. "Come get me." We rushed her to the hospital. The labor was fast and intense. Sarah refused the epidural. She was thrashing on the bed, screaming at the nurses, screaming at me. It was chaotic. But amidst the chaos, there was a strange energy coming from her. She kept looking at the door. "Where is he?" she gritted out between contractions. "Mark is right here," I said, wiping her forehead. "Not Mark," she yelled. "Jax, where is Jax?" "He's in the waiting room," I said. "We agreed, Sarah, just family in the delivery room." "He is family," she shrieked. The nurse gave me a look that said, "Control your surrogate." I squeezed Sarah's hand. "Focus on the baby, Sarah. Focus on making our family complete." That was the moment. That was when she looked at me with those wild eyes and dropped the bomb. "He isn't yours, Elena." I blinked. "What?" "I threw out Mark's sample," she hissed, the confession pouring out of her like poison. "The cup the clinic gave me, I dumped it in the sink. I used Jax. We did it at home. Then we went to the clinic and pretended." The air left the room. Mark dropped the washcloth. It hit the floor with a wet splat. "What did you just say?" Mark's voice was dangerously low. Sarah was crying now, ugly sobbing mixed with the pain of a contraction. "We needed the money," she wailed. "Jax has debt, bad debt. We needed your help, but I couldn't. I couldn't give you my baby. I wanted a baby with him, so we thought, if we just made you think it was yours, you pay for everything. You'd pay the rent. You'd pay the medical bills." My brain couldn't compute it. "But the DNA," I stammered. "You knew we'd find out." "I was going to tell you the clinic made a mistake," she sobbed. "I was going to say they mixed up the sperm. I didn't think I'd feel this guilty." Suddenly, the monitors started alarming. The baby's heart rate was dropping. "We need to push now," the doctor commanded, rushing to the foot of the bed, oblivious to the emotional nuclear bomb that had just detonated. "Push, Sarah," the nurse yelled. I stood there, frozen. I looked at this woman, my sister, who I had fed, clothed, and supported for 9 months. I looked at the stomach I had sung to, and I realized the baby inside wasn't my husband's son. It wasn't my nephew that I would raise. It was a stranger. It was a con. "Get out," Mark whispered. He wasn't talking to the doctor. He was looking at me, then at the door. "We have to leave." "We can't leave," I said, my voice hollow. "She's having a baby." "It's not our baby," Mark yelled, his control finally snapping. The doctor looked up, startled. "I need everyone to calm down or leave the room. The baby is in distress." I didn't leave. I couldn't. I stood in the corner, watching my sister push a child into the world that she had created with a lie. 10 minutes later, a baby boy was born. He was crying, a lusty, healthy cry. The nurse cleaned him off and went to hand him to me, as was the plan in our birth chart. I stepped back. I put my hands up like he was dangerous. "No," I whispered. The nurse looked confused. She looked at Sarah. Sarah was reaching out her arms. "Give him to me," she wept. "Give me my son." They placed the baby on her chest. I looked at him. He had dark hair. Mark is blonde. Sarah is blonde. Jax had dark, almost black hair. The physical proof was staring me right in the face. I felt a wave of nausea, so strong I had to hold onto the sink. Mark walked out of the room without a word. I stood there for 1 more minute, watching my sister kiss the head of the baby she had leveraged to scam us out of nearly $50,000. Then I turned and walked out too. The hallway felt miles long. I found Mark in the parking lot, sitting on the curb, head in his hands. He was sobbing. I sat down next to him. We didn't touch. We just sat there in the wreckage of our lives. The next few days were a blur of lawyers and police. Because we had a contract, and because we had paid for everything, legally it was a mess. But the fraud was clear. We demanded a DNA test before we signed a single birth certificate document. Sarah tried to fight it, but the hospital's social worker got involved when Mark told them about the confession. The test came back fast. 0% match to Mark. 99.9% match to Jax, who had voluntarily given a swab, thinking he could somehow talk his way into getting more money out of us. "Look," Jax told Mark in the hospital lobby, acting like this was a business deal gone slightly wrong. "We can still let you guys adopt him, for a fee, for the distress." Mark nearly punched him. Security had to escort Jax out. This was the lowest point of my life. I sat in the nursery at home, the green nursery with the empty crib, and I felt like a fool. I felt stupid for trusting her. I felt stupid for ignoring the red flags. I felt broken because I had loved that baby for 9 months, and now I had to turn that love off like a light switch. But then something shifted in me. I realized that, while I didn't have a baby, I had my freedom from the toxic cycle of my family. I had always saved Sarah. I had always cleaned up her messes. This was a mess I couldn't clean. And I wouldn't. We sued them. It sounds harsh, I know. But they had committed grand larceny. They had committed fraud. We sued for the rent, the medical bills, the groceries, the maternity clothes that were probably just new clothes for her. Sarah called me, screaming, crying, begging. "How can you do this to your sister? I have a newborn. We have nowhere to go." "You should have thought of that before you threw my husband's sample in the sink," I told her, my voice steady for the first time in years. I hung up. The legal battle was ugly. Sarah and Jax ended up having to move into a state-assisted shelter because they couldn't pay the rent without us. They faced criminal charges for fraud, though they took a plea deal to avoid jail time so they could parent the child. We got a judgment against them for the money, but we knew we'd never see a dime. But the real resolution wasn't the lawsuit. It was what happened 6 months later. Mark and I were slowly healing. We had started going to a support group for infertility and child loss. We had decided to close the door on biological children. The trauma was too deep. We started looking into foster care, adoption of older kids who needed homes, kids who were already here and hurting, just like us. One afternoon, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Sarah. There was no return address. Inside was a picture of the baby boy. He looked exactly like Jax. On the back, scrawled in her handwriting, it said, "He has your eyes, Alina. I'm sorry." I stared at the photo. He didn't have my eyes. He had the eyes of a stranger. But looking at him, I didn't feel the anger anymore. I felt pity. I felt pity for a child born into such chaos. And I felt a strange sense of peace. I took the photo and put it in a box in the back of my closet. Then I went downstairs. Mark was in the kitchen, making dinner. He smiled when he saw me. "Ready to go?" he asked. We had an orientation, meeting for the foster agency that night. "Yeah," I said, grabbing my keys. "I'm ready." I realized that motherhood isn't just about biology. And it certainly isn't about being manipulated or used. Motherhood is about showing up. It's about honesty. And it's about love that is given freely, not sold to the highest bidder. My sister tried to steal our future to pay for her present. She thought she could trick us into loving a lie. But the truth always comes out. Sometimes it comes out in a scream in a delivery room. And sometimes, the most painful endings are actually just new beginnings in disguise. Mark and I are now in the process of adopting a 7-year-old girl named Maya. She has scars too. She knows what it's like to be let down by the people who were supposed to protect her. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. We aren't fixing each other. We're just building something new, something real on top of the ruins. I learned that blood doesn't make a family. Trust does. And once that trust is broken, you have to be brave enough to walk away, even if it means walking away empty-handed, so you can find the hands that are actually meant to hold yours. I want to know what you think. If you were in my shoes, and your sister offered to let you adopt the baby after the truth came out, for a price, would you have considered it? Or is the betrayal too big to ever forgive? Let me know in the comments below.